Switch. So, let's start the show. Thank you. So, welcome to today's .NET Meetup. Today we have .NET Meetup with Bruno. But before he starts to talk about it, some general stuff. Is this the right slides or is it?
I don't know. Is it
not
this one?
Yeah, this one. It's not the empty one.
Obviously not. So how bad could it be?
Use that.
Let's just go this one. Wait. And open this one instead.
Next.
Yes, but you give me a PDF. Who uses PDF? There you go.
You don't have PowerPoint.
This thing you want, yes?
On this thing,
Yes. There you go.
So, okay.
It's still the wrong one, isn't it?
Okay. It's the wrong one. So,
Yes.
first,
Well, that's the first one. So
that's the first one? Okay.
Yeah.
Then it's the correct one. It's a rough day today. Yeah. Thank you for coming all.
it's the review.
Then also thank to our sponsor, Desktop here for our location or easy spaces. Before we start, we had some commercial break for our sponsors. So they have a training with JB Reinsberger and start of October surviving legacy code. JB is a cool trainer. We have the HL tour and 20 September. TSP is closed, but there are tickets on sale this year on a Friday. And if you want to rent this room for some meeting with your company, you can do this. It's this is based on the textbooks. Already the next meetups. So we have a lot of content for the next month. On 22nd of August, I will give a talk how to get .NET Core application into production and what to have to think about it. So what is supported with Microsoft, how you patch it, what's about iOS, and so on. On the 23rd of September, that is the .NET Conf. We make a watch party. Here on October the 1st, I think Glenn from PostChart is coming to us and talks about under the hood of PostChart. So the inventor, creator of PostChart comes, and at the beginning of November on the 5th, Martin will give us a talk about modern authentication OpenID Connect. So, and we have already other stuff in the pipeline. That's the first. But we're still searching for content. So some topics that are requested is how to use NodeTime, how to use Packet, and how to use simple migrations. So if somebody wants to do a talk and have some experience about this stuff, please come forward to me or our artist in the back. And let's talk what we can do. Yeah, one very, very important stuff. Please also spread the word that we exist, so that more people are coming to the .NET Meetup. So invite colleagues, invite friends, invite customers, and everybody else who has something to do with .NET.
Or not.
Or not. We can also migrate some Java guys to .NET.
We probably should.
So yeah, help us get bigger, and then it will be more fun. And we are already getting bigger because today is the first time we are streaming this meetup. Bruno is the Guinea pig for it.
Excellent.
So last time I checked, we have already also 6 people remote. And yeah, we are streaming and recording audio. If you have a problem with that and don't want on the audio track, we
works. So hi, and thanks for coming. Watching me talk about .NET libraries and NuGet. So let's see if this works. It works. So let's just do it, right? How hard can it be? Let's mirror. Let's go here. And let's try to create a library. Let's go here and do .NET new class lib and call it Vienna class lib 1 or whatever. So this is a class library, right? We can do .NET build, and this should compile. Now we have some DLLs. That's nice. So .NET pack should create a NuGet package. By default, it doesn't even debug, so that's not great. So maybe we can just change that into release. Okay, now we have a NuGet package. Yeah, okay, that's great. So we should probably make this available somewhere. I have a key to NuGet.org saved, and we can do NuGet key, and then NuGet .NET NuGet push, and I put my key here. I call it NuGet key, and the source is NuGet.org, and we just say new pkg. Let's see if this works. Oh, already exists a package like this, great. Oh yeah, because I did this before I started. So we can do this. We just bump the version and release a new version here. And who needs an editor, right? When we have this thing here. Version, that's version 2. And now with .NET back again in debug. Let's do in release. Unoptimized builds. And just send the package up. Let's see if this works. There's no git, so I can do clean. Release. Vienna 1. We delete this, and now hopefully we can publish a package to NuGet. Package was pushed. So that is easy, right? We can do open https nuget.org/packages/ what's the name of this thing? Vienna class lib 1. Class lib 1, and see if it's there. And we have a package on nuget.org. So the whole point here is to say that although it went totally wrong and I had to type a lot more stuff, it's supposed to be 3 commands if I didn't have created this before. It's very straightforward to create a library and push to NuGet. So I mean, we could end the talk now, right? But there's a lot more to do, to be honest. So let's do this. Let's extend the desktop and go back to it. So we did it. But now I'm going to actually start the real talk. So first, who I am. My name is Bruno. I'm a software engineer at Central.io, and I've been writing C# for 12 years now. Do the math. I'm actually from Brazil, and I lived in Prague for 4 years, and now I'm here in Vienna for 4 years. And next month I'm moving to Canada, so it's pretty much like 4 years in each country, and I have to move. I've created this website called NuGetTrends.com with my friend João, who's sitting there. If you want to follow the trends of the packages, and I'm the author of Sentry's.NET SDK. And based on this, the experience of writing this SDK for Sentry, I created this talk, so a lot of it. We'll see Sentry as an example. So let's start with what Sentry. Sentry is a error monitoring tool. It's open source on GitHub as well. There's some stickers in the back if you wanna take it and if you wanna check it out. I put a little video here because I know my explanation was not very good. So basically, install the SDK in your app. We have all major languages, like this is the front end. It will capture the errors in your browser, for example.
When you have a big image again, you can continue.
Okay. Okay, so that was just an introduction. Me and Sentry, what's the base of this talk, but here are the actual topics we'll discuss, right? We'll go through all of these. We'll start with some basic concepts. So the title is .NET Library with NuGet, so we'll start with what's that. So what's a .NET library? A .NET library is an assembly, right? Usually in the form of a DLL. It's pretty basic concept. I guess if you work with .NET, you already know. These two books are pretty much like the Bible of .NET, CLR via C#, and C# in depth. And the last one by John Skeet. So if you don't know who John Skeet is, you probably should. And so I brought a little video where you can see him
as the ECMA 334 standard,
reading the C#
and by
draft
ISO IEC
spec.
as the ISO IEC
It's very
23270
relaxing.
standard.
It's
Microsoft C#
1
compiler
hour
for
and
the
20
.NET
minutes
framework
long.
is a
So
conforming implementation
you
of
can,
both of these standards.
put your kids to sleep with this. It's great. I really like it. And then NuGet, what's that? So NuGet is a package manager for the .NET ecosystem, and is a primary way for developers to discover and acquire .NET open source or not libraries. NuGet.org is a free service provided by Microsoft for hosting NuGet packages. So that's what we use to shoot that package that I did in the beginning. NuGet.org, I guess. Again, does anyone never use NuGet here at all? Okay, thank you. So what's that? It's been around since 2010. It's open source on GitHub. NuGet.org, as I mentioned, it's part of Visual Studio since 2012. What it is basically that it's important to note, it's a zip file, right, with an extension nu.pkg, and that's it. And inside you have DLLs and PDBs, etc. And it will contain multiple builds of your code depending on the target. We will talk about that. So did anyone work with .NET before there was NuGet? So how did you share libraries, right? Like, it was terrific. Get some DLL and load it in your project and deploy to production. I did that as well. Great. So also is in this like basic concept, one thing you have to consider is balance. You want your library to run in all sorts of apps, but that will come with a maintenance cost, right? So if you want to support .NET 3.5, then you can't use XUnit 2.0, or there's no tasking. You can't do async and await, and it gets very complicated. If you want to support Unity 5.6 with pure C# to compile with the editor, you can't do C# 7, So this will be up to you how far back you want to support. So let's talk about making it cross-platform. For Sentry, we definitely wanted the SDK to be cross-platform. And for that, we have to discuss at least these 4 topics: .NET Standard, TFMs, and multi-targeting, and if-defs. So .NET Standard, does anyone does not know what .NET Standard is? Okay, that's great. So this being around for 3 years, I'll just skip through. And the monikers are pretty much this little ID that represents the target framework. And I put as an example, Mono pretends to be .NET Framework, so it doesn't have its own moniker. It's just NET48, and you try to put a version of Mono that works with that, and you'll see if it works. In .NET 5, what is it going to be? NET 50, NET Core App 5.0. Martin, do you know? Do you already know?
I think it's not decided yet.
It's not decided yet. Yeah. Nobody knows, I guess, if it's not decided. So multi-targeting is pretty much just setting lots of, or more than one target frame or a TFM. That means that when you build your app, it's going to create multiple versions of it, multiple DLLs, right? And this is an example from a supporting library that we have there for Sentry. And this is the output directory of a library that has multi-targeting all the way back to .NET 3.5. You get a single DLL per each TFM, you have a PDB for each one, and you can have dependencies as well. You can see NET45 has system runtime interop services runtime information, and 4.7.1 doesn't. And that's because this assembly is actually part of the .NET framework in 4.7.1. Here's how you can add different dependencies depending on the TFM. So for 4.6.1, you can use Newtonsoft JSON 6, but for NET Standard 2.0, you have to use 11, because before that it didn't. Maybe 10 did. I think 11 is the first one that's for NET Standard. And you can also include things like, you're on .NET Framework, so you know their system web, so you can include a reference to system web as well. So also multi-targeting, you want to compile your code for .NET Framework when you're running on Linux and Mac. And how do you do that? Just to compile against, you can do it with .NET Core and .NET CLI, but you need to have the contracts, right? So you need the reference assemblies pretty much. So the only way to do that before was using the mono reference assemblies, but now Microsoft released this NuGet package on the slide, NuGet NET Framework Reference Assemblies, and it simplifies things a lot. So before, this is what I had on the CS project, on the directory build props, and that's just a lot, right? So if you're not on Windows and framework starts with NET 4, then if you find this path, then it's on macOS, otherwise, etc., etc. So finally, we can delete all of that and simply use this package, Microsoft NET Reference Assemblies, and this will bring all the TFMs underneath. You can go specific and say reference assemblies.net35, and then it only tests against net35, or like only brings that package, or you can use this meta package that brings everything. And if you notice the private set assets all, does anyone does not know what that is? So, okay, so it's like this makes it like a dev dependency. So these all the assets that come in this package, say Roslyn compilers or types, they only exist within at build time, right? So when you publish your package to NuGet, it doesn't show. This package will not show as a dependency. And once I open this with Writer and it showed this twiggly thing, private assets all, doesn't do anything. I just hit Alt Enter, enter without thinking, and actually publish the package. And then this is what shows up there on NuGet.org. Microsoft Code Analysis Public API Analyzer. Like, why is this here? Like, okay, I forgot. I deleted the public assets all. So you need that if you don't want it to leak out of your package, right? Luckily, it was a beta release. So we can talk about ifdefs. Ifdef is a C, C++ thing, right? We even have it in C# as if, but everyone says ifdef. So this example is from Open Tracing. I don't have an example where I use a TFM as a constant, but here you can see if net45, then it uses call context. And that's because async locals were introduced in .NET 4.6. So again, the balance thing, they chose to support .NET 4.5 because they had to, so they have to deal with the lack of async locals, right? Personally, what I suggest is not relying on the specific TFMs when you're doing this conditional compilation, and always define some variable yourself. So in this case, I know that all net4 have system web. So I define a variable called system web, and on my code I do if system web, then I know that I can do system, HTTP context.current, right? I think it's a better way to deal with this, if defs. So also on this topic is cross-language support, is how do you make sure that your library, written in C# in this case, gets compiled down to IL, have an assembly. How do you make sure that the code can be called from F# or VB or IronPython or whatever? So one way is to annotate your assembly with CLS compliant true, which makes it so that the compiler will give you a warning if you break some of the the rules. So CLS is the Common Language Specification. Will definitely be in that book from John Skeet. And it sets rules that high-level languages that compile down to IL should adhere. And one of those is that you should not have two methods where the name only varies by casing. So in the case here, M lowercase and M uppercase. So VB can't figure it out. Like VB is case sensitive. So yeah, so it doesn't know which method to call. In this case, we don't have warnings, we have errors, but I'll tell you why in a minute. So free of warnings, one of the goals here, and that's maybe just me, but like I just can't work when you open Visual Studio and it's just like piling up lots of warnings, and then you create a new warning or not, you don't know, right? You don't keep a mental model of what are the current warnings you're happy with and you live with, and then which ones are the new ones you should clean up. So the only way, in my opinion, is to have no warnings. And the only way to have no warnings is to say, treat warnings as errors. So when you do that, like that CLS compliance thing would give a warning, it turned into an error because of this attribute. And then now you can choose, or maybe you don't want to be CLS compliant anymore. At this point, you say like, I don't care, everyone uses C# that uses my library, or F#, and this type is supported by F# or whatever. But you can make a conscious decision in this case and fix it. So documentation. It's also straightforward. Another MSBuild property, generate documentation file. So this makes it so when you build, it extracts all those XML that we annotate the code and creates an XML file, like a .xml sitting next to the DLL and the PDB. So it's very straightforward, right? One downside of it is if you don't document a public member or protected member, something that you can see be visible out of your library, you will get a warning. And we make warnings be treated as errors. So I mean, it's a prototyping hell, and that's not going to last long. You will just get rid of it because it's just you'll never be able to do anything. You write a class and try to compile, and they won't compile. So the way that's not cool. So the way I go about this is I use a condition, and I conditionally in debug I disable the warning. So I don't care about documenting the types in debug, but I usually run the build script that builds stuff in release. Before making a PR, or the PR, the CI system, when you open a pull request, will remind you, hey, where are all these, the documentation for these members. And it's true that a lot of public members, like, you don't care about documenting. Gets or sets the ID, I mean, who cares? But it's a trade-off, and if you're good enough with making sure that people document what's important and being okay with not documenting some, then you don't need this. I personally find it nice to have it. Looks much better. Drake's happy. So documentation. We have the warning, is it worth it? It's up to you. You can ignore the warning in a debug build. And you can generate doc effects. You can generate a website based on these XML docs using doc effects that comes from Microsoft, maintains that. And if you have your code on GitHub, you can push to GitHub pages. The result of doc effects will be a website, and it will be on GitHub like orgname.github.io/repository name. This is an example from Sentry's SDK. So when we merge the code, we'll see later on the build script. When we merge the code to master, it gets automatically pushed here, and you can write some markdown. Like this is some markdown that I wrote, and it generates HTML for it. So in this slide, we have some examples of the actual comments on the code. So like gives a chance to inspect or modify, reject a breadcrumb. That's actually valid input for someone, calling using your library, and that's why we build it. So we want our package to be able to be used by other packages or dependent upon by other packages. Why does that matter? If you don't strong name your assemblies, strong named assemblies can't use your assembly, right? So does anyone know what strong name is? Okay, great. So we have proper, I can skip through this. So I mean, you need it to install NuGet, you need it to put internals visible to another one, so you all know what it is, right? And don't publish two versions, like one strong name and another one not strong name, otherwise you have a problem like this we had in my previous job, where we had a package, internal package that depended on Stack Exchange Redis, and then we upgraded to .NET Core 2 that bought some Azure package that depended on Redis.strongnamed, and then that happens, and yeah, just nothing works, and you're like extern alias trying to get out of it. So this is Sentry's private key, so you can get it. So it's you have to check in your private key to source control. This is the advice from Microsoft. Actually, it's on their website. If you're an open source developer and you want identity benefits of a strong named assembly, consider checking in the private key associated with an assembly to your source control system.
We have a question. Can you explain strong naming? We
Okay.
have one in the stream.
Okay, so strong naming is yeah. Sorry, I skipped because there's 20 people here who know strong naming is. So I was like, sorry, I even put the slide here. So yeah, strong name is use asynchronous encryption so you put the public key in the assembly and you sign with your private key, so people can verify that the assembly has been signed. It's pretty much signing the assembly. I don't know why I'm looking to the screen. So it's just signing the assembly. I can go back maybe. Yeah. So you use this SNK file to sign the assembly. So this is a prehistorical .NET thing from 2002, and where even the developers wouldn't have access to the key, so you would like pre-sign, and then it would be signed later by someone who has the secret key, and yeah, it's kind of redundant nowadays, but we still need to do it. So open source projects fork. For that reason, you have to check in your signing key. So if you have to do a bug fix and somebody's not going to merge, you can fix it yourself, and you can use it at least on your infrastructure, right? So how do you strong name your assembly? We have some more XML here. You just put the path to the signing key and you say sign assembly true, and that's all. Quite a lot of MSBuild things already. So now trusted, and see that strong naming has nothing to do with being trusted, right? So nowadays you can sign your NuGet package. So what is that? You get a code signing certificate. That's a you know 509 X509 certificate. You upload it to NuGet.org, and you can sign your packages before uploading to NuGet.org. So it's nothing to do with strong naming. So another from the docs from Microsoft. So signed packages allow for content integrity, verification checks, which provides protection against content tampering. So if you have like, if you download a NuGet package off the internet, that's okay if it's signed, because you can verify that signature. Yeah. So how do you do that? You get a code signing certificate. You register the certificate in NuGet.org. You sign the package before uploading. And the tooling like Visual Studio, before installing the package, can verify the signature and then give you a warning, say like this package is not, the signature is broken or something. And this private key of the certificate, you definitely do not check into version controls. That's my experience with it. So at Sentry, we don't have Windows machines. I have Parallels, but we don't have like, in our infrastructure any Windows. And signing NuGet packages only work on Windows. So I opened this in January, and they're still working on it. Anand was nice enough to reply to me and say it's a work in progress. Back like a few days ago, we have the certificate laying around for a year, so hopefully we'll be able to sign our packages soon. But yeah, they're working on it. There's a bunch of tests related to this ongoing. So project structure. If you have only one CS project, like one project, it's kind of straightforward. But as you have a solution with tests and benchmarks and samples and multiple packages, it kind of gets more complicated. So far we saw a lot of MSBuild properties. So how do we organize that, right? We organize with directory build props. It's a magic file introduced on MSBuild 15. So when you build a project, it looks for a file in the current directory with this name. And if he finds it, just picks it up and is happy. And if he doesn't, he looks in the parent directory. And he keeps looking until he reaches the root. But he stops when he finds the first one, right? So this is the structure of the Sentry repository. And so where we have project A and B, etc., would be, say, Sentry STNet, Sentry Serialog. And we have a directory build props here that has to automatically, to manually include the parent. So all of these ones have to include the root directory build props. So be ready. You're going to see a lot of XML right now. So I don't expect you to memorize all the properties. It's just to kind of demonstrate how you organize the structure. So at the root, you will set things like length version. So you want to use C# 7.3, you set it once. You don't put it all your project, CS project files all over the place. You can also say, hey, this is my signing key, and sign the assembly and C# deterministic build for the compiler, whatever. Like, so global settings would go here. So for the folder specific, you will set things like in source, everything under this folder will become a NuGet package. So you put things that are important for packaging, like generate documentation and source link, etc. For a test project, we don't pack. We set testing library. So what version of XUnit do you use? I set it only once. It's so inside this directory build props, and all the test projects underneath just use it, and so forth. Right? Get the idea? That's a lot. So source, here I can set generate documentation, and authors are Sentry team and contributors. This will be picked up by all the NuGet packages that we build. And underneath we have a specific, these are the tests, so just in side by side. Here we can say coverlet build version and substitute version, and we set it, doesn't affect the source projects. And this is a specific project. This becomes a NuGet package. Here we do the multi-targeting. In the case of Sentry, support NET Standard 2.0 and NET 4.6.1 with the individual dependencies, etc. And the description, for example, we can see official SDK for Sentry. And if you put side by side with Sentry.ASP.NET core, you can see most of the settings are all the same because it was set at the higher level point, but the description is different, right? So it's just a hierarchy and you set the values and that's it. But enough XML, let's see some JSON. We have one JSON file to show you because project JSON is dead for a few years, but still, I still miss it. We have global JSON. So that's a way for you to lock in the SDK version, the .NET SDK version. And the advantages that I see with it is if a contributor pulls the code and tries to .NET build and he's on version 1 and then things don't work, or he's on version 3 preview 7 and things don't work, then there's just less surprises if you lock in the version of the SDK, right? And now debuggable. Like, why do we want to make it debuggable? I want to be able to load your library into my app, and if there's a bug or a crash coming from it, I want to be able to step into, right? So we use resharper, it disassembles the code, or writer disassembles. It works, but it's not great. There's something much better. It's called source link. Does anyone know what source link is? That's great. Okay. So it embeds version control information to the PDB at build time, in a nutshell. So there's no need to disassemble the code. So the IDE is able to fetch the source as you step through, and it also by default fetches the assembly informational version, which holds a string, so it appends like a plus and a commit hash. It's still in preview, and it's part of the .NET Foundation. It's obviously important to note that the Git information has to be in the same directory when you're building it, right? Otherwise, this wouldn't work because it looks at the current Git state. So how do you add that? Now there's Microsoft Source Link GitHub preview, and again, private set assets all. So show me. If you all know what it is, I'll just not show you. Do you want me to show you? Yeah. Yes, you do. You definitely use it, but okay. All right. So let's just mirror our nice library. So in this library, this is the library we just created, right? So if I do source link test, let's do print JSON. See, source link JSON not found. So that's our like 5-minute library. It's not very debuggable, right? But if we go here to Sentry, for example, Sentry.NET, it's very annoying. Source and then Sentry, and build this. Then I build debug net standard, and then I do source link print JSON Sentry.pdb. Now I see what it does. So pretty much what it does is it adds this JSON into the PDB. And what it is, it's a mapping all your stack traces in the PDB, because I compiled this machine, would be prepended with users, Bruno, Git, blah, blah, blah. And it maps to that URL there on GitHub, right, with that commit hash, because that's the exact revision that we're in. And that's enough for the IDE to be able to find the code. So here I have a little sample. It's just the ASP.NET Core 2.1 app. And I add Serilog and Sentry, etc. I added a little breakpoint here. Can you see that? And also you have to configure the project to enable external debug, source debug. Visual Studio has the same thing, some other settings. And if we debug this thing, let's see if it works. We're just saying something that crashes. Now I'll step into. Yeah, works. So this code is already like from Sentry internal, some internal types, and we can just step into all the way, and works. It downloads external sources on demand, right? And that's it. All right, Austrian PDBs. I'm not going to ask if anyone knows what a PDB is, so just I got the idea here. So PDBs contain debug information generated by the compiler. It contains, for example, the file and class and function names and line numbers. And it is used to give you meaningful stack traces. So on the client, when there's a crash, it will look up the PDB and try to resolve the file names and everything to send you to create a stack trace with meaningful data. You know, so obviously we want to have them, right? So one option is to create symbol packages. What it does, when you do NuGet pack, it will create a package with code and a package with the symbols. And you can upload both of them to NuGet.org. If you have your private symbol server, you would have to configure your IDE to go fetch on demand the symbols. Personally, not my favorite. What I like to do is to have it distributed side by side with the code. So portable PDBs are very small. They're about 30% of the size of your DLLs. Portable PDBs were created with the .NET Core project. And so an easier way is just to output the PDB to the bin folder and let it get packed with the code with the DLL. Right? So you just ship it with NuGet.org. So when you download a new PKG, we'll have an XML for docs, the the DLL, and the PDB. Let's talk about having a stable API now. So SEMVer, semantic versioning. I got one slide for this. It's straightforward, I guess, should be. But if you have a breaking change, you bump the major version, so it indicates for consumers, like, you might not even compile after this, or it depends on what the API you're using. If there are just new features, something you're introducing that is backward compatible, then you can bump just a minor version. If it's just a bug fix, you can bump the patch, right? So that's a straightforward way to version your library. And public API. How do you make sure that, like, how do you know you have a breaking change? You know, someone will pay attention when he's checking the PRs. You can do that, but ideally we'll rely on tools to point out that something has changed, that you have a breaking change. And in .NET, there's a Rosling analyzer. That's very new, although there was an alternative before. So what it does, it writes the public API to a file. It's a TXT file, public API.shipped.txt, for example, and unshipped, and you version control that. And every time you build, it just compares what is on the file with what you're generating. They can alert you. Like in this case, I caused an error on purpose. So it's not part of the declared API, which means you should obviously do something about it, like add to it or fix it. This was contributed by Josh DeGraw, so thanks. We got a lot of contributions from him. And what it shows up on Visual Studio and not on Writer, I found out, is it gives you this little hint here. Hey, this is not on your public API unshipped or so, but you can edit. So just, again, control dot here, and it just writes this to the text file. This package is very new. If you look at it, Microsoft Code Analysis Public API Analyzer is like from March. It's already at 25,000 downloads though. But there was something else from the community. I think it wasn't just changed the package name. That's why it's sort of so new. Roslyn, I think, uses this since the beginning, because you find on a history of their public API TXT files like 4 years old or something. Let's talk about build and CI. You definitely want to build your thing. So for the Syntrest TK, we had these requirements, or everybody does, most of them anyways, what we talked. You want to restore NuGet packages, you want to compile all your targets, you want to add the source link information to the PDB, you want to strong name your assemblies, you want to run all the test targets, so your tests will be against .NET Core, .NET Framework, and Mono when on Linux and Mac. And you want to create code coverage reports to upload to CodeCov or whatnot, and create documentation, and publish the API docs. And of course, generate the NuGet packages so you can push them to NuGet.org. In our case, we didn't need all of them in all operating systems. I just need to make the NuGet package once, because I copy from the CI service and I upload to NuGet.org. So we'll see here the example. So this is the script for Windows, build.ps1. It couldn't be smaller, right? Except that error action preference could be deleted because we don't have any command let, so you just have to check for error codes. But .NET test -c release will do first restore, then build, and then we'll run all the tests already in release. And when you do pack, since the artifacts are already there, it just uses them up and then creates a package. So you just specify no build and you're good. So here we have no code coverage, right? Because what we're packaging here, this runs on MapVeyor. They have artifacts, so we can download from MapVeyor, but the code coverage doesn't run here. But it runs here. So this is the Bash version that runs on Travis. So it runs on Linux and Mac. That use source link, we don't need it. I don't know if we ever did. I just showed you source link without specifying this parameter and it worked. So, but here we do collect code coverage, and this runs. And then we use CodeCov. There's a Bash script that uploads the files to CodeCov. And on line 12, you can see we also run a little build script inside the docs folder. And this uses the docfx. It downloads docfx and then uses mono to run docfx. And if we're on Travis on Linux, so it doesn't run both Linux and Mac, and it's not a pull request and it's master, then we also clone that some Python code that just uploads the HTML all to GitHub pages. So where do I build it? Free for open source. When we started this project, Q2 2018, that was pretty much Travis built for Linux and Mac, and MapVeyor only had Windows. So that was Circle CI, which I didn't look at the time. I don't know if they have free Mac. As far as I know, they don't. And GitLab, I just guess you have to be hosted on GitLab. I don't know. But today, Travis also has Windows builds, and MapVeyor has Linux builds too. So you have more options. But Azure DevOps now supports public repos. Before it was just private repos on like Visual Studio Online, it was the name. So for NuGet Trends, for example, we use Azure DevOps. It's nice to have only one solution to all of your builds. But Travis and MapVeyor work just fine. So what we're doing is both scripts will do a restore, source link, strong name, etc. Because all of that is controlled via MSBuild, right? So when you do tests, just runs everything that is set on MSBuild. And then on Travis, we'll do the documentation and publish to GitHub pages. And on Windows, we create the NuGet packages that we copied over and upload to NuGet.org. So I don't know if it's obvious, but at least when I used TeamCity before, I used to create my build pipeline with the UI and add the steps, right, and do like test, and then I added another one. And I really don't suggest doing that anymore. What I suggest is like write a script that I try to keep it simple. Obviously, you know, .NET Test does a lot, does the restore and everything. But try to do most of the work in the script, so you can test it locally, and everyone runs the same thing, and your build server runs the same thing. So what you can't do there, you can then do on Travis and MapVeyor. For example, uploading code coverage, I don't do it on my machine. I just do it from the build server. So it's there on Travis. It says like after building run the upload of code cov, right? And lastly, on the web UI, you only set your secrets. So to push the code to GitHub pages, you need some GitHub key, right? So not anyone can run it and overwrite the docs. So that I set there on Travis, the secret PI key. So now the last point, just publish. We already did it in the beginning. .NET, NuGet, publish. So you might not be working on GitHub, you don't have public code, so you can just use a private NuGet feed. You might be on the cloud, or you might want to self-host. There's a million options. Don't expect you to memorize them, obviously. I'll give the slides later, I'll put it online somewhere, so you can just see all the links and copy what you want to see. And obviously NuGet.org. So to upload stuff there is very easy. You just create an account to Microsoft. It's actually a Microsoft account to log in. You can upload a package via the web UI. You can drag and drop a NuGet package, and it works. I did that in the beginning just to, you know, it's quicker than writing some script in the beginning. You can obviously just upload via .NET to get push, as I did in the first 5 minutes. And now, which is sort of new, I mean, it's from last year, you can create an organization. Before I used to own all the Sentries package. Now we can create Sentry as an organization and add members to it and make that the owner. And you can also set prefix reservation, which is like very nice, because I don't know if you've seen this. Microsoft.office.interop.word from ebits and Cameron boot, whatever that is, right? So that's not from Microsoft at all. And we have packages that are system dot, which is just, someone just uploaded system dot. And that was because anyone could upload anything, and now you can reserve the prefix, and we did that with Sentry. We got Sentry's namespace reserved. So now if you want to upload Sentry dot something, it shouldn't work. I didn't test it. If you test it, let me know if it breaks. Yeah, we wrote a blog post about that when it came out. Well, this is the blog post if you want to check out. And what else to look at? There's a lot more stuff that I didn't look at. I would like to, but I didn't have the time. So would appreciate some PRs. So linting code formatter is nice because not just FXCop will warn you that this shouldn't be like that, or you have 2 spaces. Code formatter will actually rewrite your code to what you define as the rule. And sign NuGet packages. If you're on Windows, just go ahead and do it. If you're not, then you can wait with me until it's done. There's something nice new on NuGet. It's called reproducible NuGet restore. So it's a log file, that bucket or package. I don't know how the F# people call it. They already had it as far as I know, but now there's on NuGet as well. I tried it and didn't work, and I opened a Stack Overflow question. Nobody answered yet, so if you can help me out there. Editor config. I think VS Code now supports it. The C# plugin for VS Code. And Rider also supports it, and Visual Studio, so you can set a lot of rostering rules with it. Say you should use var or you shouldn't use var, and then the IDEs will help you out with this. And there's like lots of rostering analyzers. I just found about dependabot semver stability, so it will check how often you break or you bump your major version and give you some rating or something. I don't know. Still want to look at it. And C# 8 has just a lot of stuff that's coming out, so that'll be fun. So learn more. When I started this project, this documentation didn't exist, unfortunately, but I strongly suggest reading this. Most of the things I talked in this talk are actually in this documentation. There's like do's and don'ts. Just do not upload multiple versions of your library, like strong named and not strong named. It's there, right? And yeah, it's great. I strongly suggest reading it. And this is Sentry's SDK in the last year. We released in September the non-preview version and picked up lots of 400K. And check nugettrends.com. It's open source. We would love to have more people involved in the project and build new features and improve the NuGet ecosystem. And that's all I have for today. Thanks.
Any questions for Bruno?
Some questions, please. Anything? Already knew half of it. So.
Good.
All right, great. So you want this, I guess, no?
I want my break slide.
Let's see if it's the right one. No. This one now.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay.
So, good. Yeah. You can switch to the first. So, thanks for you for speaking. And as introduced at the last meetup, you get our custom-made .NET
That's why I came.
Meetup Vienna coaster. So everybody who held a talk will get one of these. Yeah, so thanks you for having the talk.
Thanks.
And again, thank you all for coming today. Would be a little bit boring to be alone. And yeah, thanks again to our sponsor for the location. short reminder about the next meetups. So 22nd August, it's here. .NET Core in production. The .NET Conf streaming is also here in September. Under the hood of PostJob on the 1st of October is here, and on November the 5th, the authentication with OpenID Connect, we are at Seattle.
Oh.
Cool. Cool. Then, yeah, again, reminder, spread the word, your colleagues, friends, customers, everybody. We have here room for 86 people. Much space left. Cool. And yeah, I have to say goodbye to our friends on the stream because we are going now to Copa Beach.
Yes, that's why we came here.
So, yeah, today not here in the office in Copa Beach. The weather should be fine enough. Plan is who wants to join us about in 5 to 10 minutes at the entrance, and Raul will lead the way. And yeah, to Copa Beach, it's somewhere in the near of the metro station at the NuGet. Good. Then I hope you see a lot of you then there. Thank you.
I want to hook until you're done with your streaming.